Okay, you guys, so I am making the ferrets a new playmat. I have done this in a prior video, but I don't even know if that video is still up anymore. It was when I had not been sewing very long, and so I think the playmat before turned out great, but I just have some better ideas and some better ways to put it together, I think, this time. You learn over the years, you know? So, you could do this with all fleece. I'm going to do it with fleece and cotton because I've been dying to use this goat fabric forever, and I just want the top to be cotton. It kind of makes it pop. But my base is going to be this brown anti-pill fleece. And I'm probably going to do this in 2 layers so that it's thick. So I'm going to put this front to back. You'll see. Anyway, I'll show you when we get there. But, and it's kind of, the size that you make this is completely up to you. But I'm going to have a couple of different sections of the playmat that's going to allow them to do different things. I'm going to probably make it the size of this table. And the size of this table is 46 inches by 28 inches. That's the size of my cutting table. So I'm going to cut out my base, and then I'll show you guys what my plan is for putting the stuff on top of the playmat, just so you guys understand what we're doing here. And I'm going to make different types of things to go across the whole playmat, all different types of little activities. And some of them are going to be like squares. So there'll be like a square here, and then something else here, and something else here, and something else there. Some of the squares are going to have holes in the center so that the ferrets can get inside and kind of tunnel under it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making squares and then sewing them together kind of like a quilt, and then sewing that piece to this so that when I flip it inside out, there's a space for them to get inside of the playmat, but also play on top of the playmat. So now I'm going to cut out my squares. So now I'm going to create one of my squares with a hole. So I've taken a piece of my cotton, I'm putting it right sides together with a piece of fleece, totally separate from my base. I need to have this in order to do the cutout, so you'll see why here in a second, that you just can't do this with your base. So I'm going to measure my square. Might actually make this a bit bigger. As long as you cover this however you want, there's really no right or wrong reason to how you put this together, as long as it's the size you want. So you might have to think about that, to plan it out in your head a little bit or on paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this out. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to make 2 of these. Okay, so I have cut 2 squares, fabric with the cotton facing right sides together with the fleece. If your fabric has a design, make sure you have it facing the right way when you do this. I'm going to, instead of using a regular circle, I'm going to be using a heart shape. I'm just going to put it dead in the center. And I guess centered as it looks. I'm going to trace around it. I got this heart shape online. I went to free clip art and I just downloaded it and printed out a shape that I liked instead of a circle. Just remember that you have to sew around this. So if you're not really great at sewing like intricate, or don't make it really hard if you think it's gonna be hard for you to sew around it, just remember you will have to sew around it. So if it's got real sharp edges or something like that, it might be a little difficult to do this next step. Just keep that in mind if you're going to go for a cute little design. That's why I did a simple heart. It just doesn't require a lot of intricate stuff that's hard to do with a machine. Okay. So I have hearts on both of these. Let me see if I can zoom in. My lighting is terrible today. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew all the way around this entire heart. Just sew the whole thing, just sew completely around. I'm going to do it to both of these. Okay, so now you should have something that looks like this. You can unclip these. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut the heart shape. Make sure you don't cut your stitch line. And just kind of get as close to the edge as you can. Alright, and then once you do that, you're going to want to take your flannel and flip it so that the wrong sides are now facing together. So flip your flannel through the hole. It should look like this. This gets a little tricky when you do these hearts. I've done this before, so there we go. Alright, so what I normally do, and this part is optional, I would recommend stitching around it if you can. just, I try to straighten this up so that my fleece isn't sticking out or like coming out the tops. So I'm just going to clip this down. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut out that other one, and then I'm going to top stitch around the heart. A, it just looks nice, and B, it just kind of holds everything in place. Okay, so just to give you an idea of kind of where I'm going with this will be my play mat. This is going to be one corner, or this will be one corner. I'm not sure where I'm going to place these, but just to give you an idea. And then we're going to make the next item to add to this. So it's going to be a bunch of squares that have different things. Okay, so next I've taken a piece of pink. I've taken 2 pieces. I have them right sides facing together, like this. I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to be making kind of like a tunnel, but it's going to be secured to the mat. So we have to make it a little bit different than we normally do. It won't be a full circle. I'm going to make this 16 inches because I want to roll it back so that I can put some boning in it to keep it open. I might make it 20 by 16 and I can always adjust it if I need to. I just am not really sure what size I want it, so I want to make sure that I give myself enough room. We're going to cut this out. Okay, so I'm just going to clip the sides. So for stability, because I want this to hold up in the center, I'm going to take a piece of extra U-Haul. You could also use fusible fleece, you could use batting, just anything that kind of gives it some security, some stabilization. I'm going to make the U-Haul about 3 inches shorter than my ends. So that way you'll see I'm going to roll the ends, and I don't want a whole bunch of extra stuff in my way. It makes it too hard to try to roll and stitch the ends, like to put the boning in when you have all these extra layers. So I only want the padding exactly the size of my tunnel. These ends are going to be rolled, and they're not actually going to be, the tunnel won't be this long. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to leave these ends unstitched, but I'm going to sew straight up the sides. So sew your long sides, but leave your short sides open. So I'm just going to trim off the excess around the edges. Now take your tunnel and fold it so the right sides are facing out. So first, you want to take your open ends and you want to roll them. You want to roll it so you're hiding your raw edges. So you're going to double roll it like this. And then you're going to clip it or pin it in place the best that you can. It's going to be a little bit thick, so just know that. So take your open end, you're going to roll it twice. And then I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this so that it's closed, so that this raw edge is hidden. So I'm just stitching across this folded edge on both sides. Okay, so I stitched the one side, but I just want to tell you guys that I ended up a little tricky. So this is boning. It's in a casing, but I'm taking it out of the casing because it's easier. It's a little tricky, so you're going to want to lay the boning in there and roll with the boning. It's not easy, or leave a space enough that you can slide it in. It was kind of tight for me, so I didn't think I could really get it in there if I did it that way. So I put it in before I stitched it. Just make sure that you don't stitch over the boning, because it will not be good to your machine. So this is a little tricky. You don't have to do this. I think it'll stay open regardless. That's just going to give an added touch, but it's completely optional. I want the boning as close to this top edge as I can get so I can stitch it and not stitch over the boning. So once you get it in there, go stitch it, closed. Okay, so what I did was I cut another piece of brown. It's bigger than this on purpose. We're going to have to stitch these all together. You see what I mean? So we need a little bit of extra to do that so that we can make a cover that's kind of like a quilt to attach to the bottom of the playmat. So you want this to be a little bit big so that you can create that. Now, I am going to actually use this because I want this square size. So I want my tunnel to be about the same, a little bit smaller than this, because we're going to lose some of this edge when we stick it together too. So we're going to put our tunnel like this, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch the sides to this piece of tan. And then we'll trim this up to match this, or get a little bit close. This is a little bit wider, but that's okay. We'll figure it all out when we get it together. So I'm going to stitch this down now. I'm just stitching alongside this soft edge, and I'll make any adjustments to the size of this when I go to put everything together. Okay, and when you're done, it should look something like this. Okay, so this is going to be my next square, and this was really easy. Basically what I did was I took a bottom piece. This is 14 by 14. And then I took a different color, and I made it 12 by 12, and I just laid it in the center. Right sides are facing up for all of this. And then I took a square and I made it 10 by 10. And then I made a square that was 8 by 8. And then a square that was 6 by 6. And one that was 4 by 4. You can do these in however sizes you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'll go over to my machine. I'm going to sew a line straight up the center this way and straight up the center that way. So just make a cross. And then what that will do is create pockets. My ferrets love this because then they have to dig and find the treats. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to make a snuffle mat. What I did was I took 3 rectangle pieces and laid them on top of this piece. This is going to be the piece that I stitch and make part of my top. So I have a piece that's a rectangle. It's not the whole length of this. And then another piece that's the same size and another piece. And we're going to add to this. Or you don't have to. You can put something else here. But what I'm going to do is I've got 3 layers. Well, 4 if you count this. But really, we're just working with these 3. You're going to go to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch down the center right here. Okay, so I stitched a line across this part right here. And then I went and I made two more strips like this. I'm going to do the exact same thing, except, hold on. Okay. So what you want to do when you put your next set of strips on is you want to put them a little bit so that the edges are hanging, so that this is hanging over top of this. And you'll see why in a second. So we're just going to let that overlap a little. Actually, I want a little bit more than that. Yeah, that should be good. Alright, and then when you go to put your third one on, you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to want to lift this up and then come in so that the strip is, they're overlapping. And this will all make sense in a second. So you're going to go to your machine and you're going to stitch down the center of each one of these as well. Okay, so now that you have these attached, it'll look like this. You have to now cut your strips. And what you're doing is you're going to cut as close to the stitch line on each of them as you can. You're going to cut about, I don't know, maybe an inch or so. Wide strips or 2-inch strips, it's up to you. Just don't cut your bottom fabric, just cut this fabric. You're going to want to go as close to the line as you can without cutting it. And we're going to do that on both sides. Alright, so you should have something that looks like this. And then what you're going to need to do is flip this back over. This is not right. And then you just kind of move them around. And you kind of got to make it look like a snuffle mat. To do that, you got to pull them apart. And the thicker you make this, and the more rows you do, the fuller the snuffle mat will be. Alright, let's put the top together. Okay, so please ignore the scraps on my floor, because that's where I've been throwing them during this process. Okay, so I have it laid out. These are just extra pieces of brown to finish creating the square. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start here. I'm going to sew rows, and then I'll attach everything together. I'll flip it upside down and attach it to this. I'm going to start with this piece. I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it right sides together with this. I'm going to stitch it across the bottom so that when it's stitched and we open it, it'll look like this. So I stitched this together. Now this looks like this. I'm just going to lay it here for a second. Get some clips or some pins. There's this tiny edge here. You're just going to take whatever, and it depends on how you set this up. So your squares may not look anything like my squares. Obviously, you're probably not going to have the same fabric as me. But basically what you're doing is you're piecing together your top. You're creating the top. So I'm just going to clip these. I'm basically going to sew all of these pieces together to make the top one piece. I'll do the same thing here where we flip them right sides together. You're going to want to lift up. There's an edge If there's not, just cut away that excess. Just cut a little space so you have an edge. You're going to stitch these right sides together as well. And I'll come back and show you what my top looks like as one piece. So this is my top. It's all one piece. I'm just going to trim up these little spots like this, and then I will get out my bottom piece. So I've cut out my piece, which is the same size as my top, and then I'm going to make the back just this flannel. So the inside is going to be the right side of my fleece, and the back is going to be this flannel of the goats. Here's the thing, I'm going to cut this and stitch it first before I add the top. So you're going to want to put the right sides together like normal. Cut them out. Okay, so now I've got the, this is the back, or the back, we'll say it's the back of the playmat. So I have the right side of the flannel facing the right side of the fleece. I'm going to go around and stitch this. I'm going to leave about a 5-inch opening so I can flip it right side out. And okay, so here is the bottom of my playmat. I'm just going to pull this right side out. So I'm just pushing out the corners real quick. Okay, so what we're doing now is we are closing up this opening. So I'm just rolling in my edges where the opening is. I'm going to go around and straighten my edges around the entire thing. And then I'm going to stitch this opening closed. Okay, so now you have the bottom and you've stitched that opening closed. Here's the really important part, okay? This is the right side of your fabric. This is going to be the inside of your project. And make sure my goats are all going the right direction. I'm going to put the right sides together. So I'm putting the back of my fabric facing the right side of my top piece. I'm going to clip this all in place. And then we're going to stitch it. Okay, so now that you've got everything clipped together, I just want to say this. If you didn't have like a tunnel or anything big, you could sew all the way around and then pull it right side out through one of your openings like this. However, because I have the tunnel, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to fit all of this through that hole. So I'm going to have to leave an opening and then flip this right side out and stitch the opening closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pin and a pin. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to start here, sew all the way around. I'm going to stop at this pin, and then that way I can pull it right side out, and then I will roll this up and hide the seams and stitch it closed. Alright, so now that you've stitched it, just make sure that everything is stitched and closed. Alright, and now we're going to turn her right side out. And there you have your playmat. And now we just got to roll this, which actually looks great. It's rolling up on its own perfectly. Oh, it's so good. Alright, sweet. There we go. I'm trying to decide if I want to do a top stitch or not. Wait, I'm going to close off this opening now. Okay, so now I need to stitch this closed. If you can do this by hand, and if you do it by hand, you won't see your stitches at all. I might do a top stitch on this just so that it is all matching and I don't have to hand stitch that closed, because it's just faster to use the machine. But this is really thick, so if you don't have a machine that goes over thick fabric well, I would not recommend top stitching this. You might just want to close that off by hand. But anyway, I'm going to close off this opening now. Okay, so instead of top stitching the whole thing, I just top stitched the tan part so that it's uniform. So this is my playmat, and this goes all the way through. Oh, they're going to love this. I'm so excited. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. See you next time.